today we're going to be learning how to make these noises. Alright, what's up everybody? I've been meaning to do a phase plant tutorial for a little bit, and we're all locked up, so let's fucking do it. Apologies in advance for the overall quality of this. I'm on my secondary laptop, not my main desktop that has most of my plugins. I'm using a $30 Best Buy USB mic that picks up an ungodly amount of background noise and that I can't control the gain on. But, you know, YOLO, we out here. So this is the kind of noise we're going to be learning how to make today. Okay, cool. So I call this the phase plant super operator technique. Oh yeah, one more thing. I don't have Adobe Premiere installed on this computer. I mean, I could install it, but I'm going to try to get this all in one take on the first take without having to edit it. So bear with me if my brain stops working at any point. Yeah, so I call this the super operator technique. And what we're doing here is a 4 oscillator FM patch in phase plant. Technically, it's not actually FM, it's actually PM, or phase modulation. I posted up a little investigation video on Twitter yesterday asking about why FM and phase plant sounded different from FM in serum or operator, and the conclusion that we came to is that quote-unquote FM and serum and operator is in fact actually phase modulation, and for whatever reason FM has become the colloquially used term for phase modulation. Who the fuck knows why, but it's what we're dealing with. So in essence, what we're going to be doing today is creating a setup similar to what we can do in operator in phase plant, but because phase plant is a lot more advanced and modular and has a lot of cool features, we get something that's pretty damn flexible. So I did a tutorial on operator forever ago. I recorded another one recently, but I never uploaded it for whatever reason. But yeah, you know, some standard FM stuff, or I guess PM. I'm just going to keep saying FM because that's what everybody's familiar with hearing. For those who aren't familiar with operator, it's essentially the same thing as doing this in serum. Let's go to all sine waves. So you're doing FM from B, and then B from sub, so we're doing three-way FM. But in this case, we're going to be using 4 oscillators. And we can get some pretty cool results, as we just heard. Yeah, pretty thick. All right, so we're going to open up phase plant here. And I'll say, I haven't been super crazy about phase plant up until I discovered this technique. It hasn't really clicked for me, but now that I've been doing this, I'm a huge fan, and I think I'm going to be using it a lot more. So I'm sure everyone's at least a little bit familiar with phase plant at this point. If not, we'll just do a quick breakdown. It's a completely modular, or I guess like semi-modular soft synth with wavetables, sampling, noise, and analog. Most people are just hyped on it being a super modular wavetable sort of synth, and that's going to be the focus here. And then the effects is really flexible, and then you got filters and distortion within the oscillator section, which is really sweet, and we'll be using that a little bit. So let's just go for the setup. So the way we set this up, we make our first wavetable here and our first output here. Perfect. So this is going to be the same thing as our A oscillator an operator, because this is the only oscillator that's actually outputting noise. And if we turn that off, everything stops, because these are just the modulators, frequency, or as the case may be, phase modulating our oscillator A. So over here in phase plant, this is going to act as our A, or our actual output oscillator, or the carrier to our modulation, if you will. So then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So now this is exactly the same as our 4 oscillator stack in operator. Well, not by default, because we have to set up all the routing, but we can achieve roughly the same results. So let's try it out real quick. So your first inclination might be to go, okay, so this is the output of the oscillator, right? And just a quick note, the routing and phase plant, everything has to be going into an output, right? And it goes top to bottom. So right now, only this oscillator is being output, and all of these are silent. And that's exactly what we want, because we want to use all of these as modulators, so we don't want any output. But if we put an output down here, then we'd be able to hear all of these oscillators, but we don't want that. So this is essentially just our 4 oscillator FM stack here. So your first inclination might be to route this to the shift right here, which would be true FM, but as we know, true FM is actually a little bit wonky. And then when you start using multiple oscillators, you get wonky results like that. So if we're trying to approximate the kind of FM, quote-unquote, sounds we get in serum or operator, we're actually going to be doing phase modulation. And we can see right away that we can get some pretty crazy results, just like we get out of operator when we start cranking with all the ratios and the volumes. So I'm just going to run through this step by step, just so we know exactly what we're doing. As always with all of my tutorials, I'm never into creating a specific sound. I kind of hate when people are like, "Ooh, Space Lace's excretion master rhythm patch tutorial, clickbait me now." I mean, obviously that gets clicks and likes on YouTube and shit. But I'm a bit of a nerd, and I like getting into the technical aspect of it and explaining exactly what we're doing, because, I mean, I just think that's cool. That's one of the coolest parts about audio production, is not only learning how to do things, but why and how they work and the technical aspects of it. So, as I said before, we go to the phase. And to do your modulation in phase plant, I wish it had a click and drag like Serum has, but you go click and then click. I also wish it had a right click bypass, but you know, hopefully they'll add these features in the future for phase plant. I think this could be the dominant synth in the market if they added just a few more workflow things that made it feel a little bit more like Serum, but I kind of like it now. It's a little bit like S tier, heady class. Like, I don't think a ton of people are going to be switching to phase plant full time, just because it's a little bit more complex to get cool sounds out of than something like Serum. There's a new synth coming out soon though called Vital, which is really cool. I'll make some videos on that as soon as we're allowed to. Could be the Serum killer. We'll see. So again, when we do this, that is the same thing as doing this in operator. And it's the same thing as doing this in Serum. You can hear it doesn't actually sound exactly the same in, oh, it's because I have it on 1 here, 0. Yeah, the FM algorithm does sound a tiny bit different in Serum for whatever reason. I mean, every synth is going to have a slightly different algorithm, but that's the general idea of what we're doing here. And then I think if it's your first time trying this technique, I would just go ahead and route all of them. And in general with FM, you want to be careful with these amounts. Because when you start going up there, it gets pretty aggressive, and then if we bring in like this guy, you can hear how quickly it becomes just really noisy. So right now we're getting like a pretty cool FM noise, and this is just all with sine waves, all on one ratio. We can try playing with the ratios a little bit. So you can hear we can start getting some pretty crazy stuff. And here's, you know, obviously the main advantage you have over something like operator is that these are all wavetables. So you can start doing really complex FM patches with, you know, these morphs on each oscillator, which is something I've kind of been wanting forever. I always talked about like, oh, imagine if there was a serum that you could do like matrixed FM with in the style of FM8, but they're all wavetable oscillators. And this isn't quite that, but it's the closest damn thing we've gotten so far, which is really cool. You can hear it sounds a little noisy and a little messy when we start morphing through the wavetables here, but we're going to talk about how to start cleaning these up and getting them more dialed in a sec. But I'd say the first thing to try is just playing around with the ratios here and seeing if you can get cool stuff. And as always, there's no set rules here. Just be a little careful going super high, because you can get cool stuff, but it starts getting pretty artifacty and aliasy the higher you go. Let's say we want to make a wub out of this. Let's just bring in an LFO. A couple things to take note of if you're bringing out an LFO and phase plant. Again, another thing that I find a little bit not my favorite about phase plant is that the LFOs just aren't as easy and intuitive to work with as the serum ones, but they're pretty fucking good still. So I'll usually change it to sync over here. You'll usually change it to unipolar. Then I'll go in and just do something like that. And then we could try just modulating the... Okay, I believe... Yeah, we go here, and then this is modulating the... I wonder if that would sound better if we automated just the level of the actual oscillator. Let's try that. Okay, so actually that was sort of the first time I tried doing automations on the volumes or the FM amounts within phase plant or within a phase plant patch like this, and let's be honest, that kind of sounded like shit. So, like, let's say we want to just turn this into a wub real quick. This is just going to be a super basic one, then we'll do some more advanced stuff in a sec. And probably another one of the best features about phase plant, so you can just spam dispersers inside the synth. Okay, cool. So super basic, and now let's go a little bit deeper. That's not phase plant. Okay, so we're just going to go in and do the same initial setup. But this time we're going to use different wavetables that are a lot more conducive to getting a sound with cool modulation. So I'm actually pretty keen on using the default wavetable as the base carrier. But then as we heard, it gets pretty messy if we're using the default wavetable for all the other ones. So let's look through here. So clearly the phase plant guys were very much intending the synth to be used this way because they have a ton of really awesome basic waveforms that sound amazing when we use them in this manner. So the ones you're going to want to be checking out for patches like this, these are all more like, I guess you could call them serum type waveforms. Like these have a ton of harmonic content. They're going to sound really meaty. The growls, noisy, all this stuff is cool if you want to just, you know, crank on a wavetable and then put effects on it, kind of more in the style of how you'd make a serum synth. But if we're doing this, we want to be looking at the modulators, the morphs, saws, sines, squares, and triangles. So these are just all variations of basic waveforms that have, you know, some morphing built in, or, you know, something interesting going on. So let's try this downsample triangle. So that's cool. Let's try maybe saw at a triangle. Let's go to something in the sines. AM sine could be cool. Okay, so let's go for this. I'm feeling like we might not necessarily modulate this, but just moving this around will get us a lot of different timbres out of our patch once we start putting it all together. And with this process, I'd say just be careful, experiment, don't go too crazy, be mindful of your volumes here, and just go and yeah, try a bunch of different stuff. So this is really cool. The modulators here, I've been getting some really cool results out of. Let's try one of these. Let's try the remap mirror. Definitely a fan. Sick, and let's try something interesting on this last one. Maybe something from the triangles section. D-phase triangle. See, that's really subtle, but that could be cool to automate like movement on here. That might do a lot for the patch, honestly. Let's just experiment with some different ones, though. Too noisy for me. Tension triangle. Let's go with that. I think we try playing with the ratios some. So you can see there's just a lot of trial and error and experimentation with this process. You could even try something different. Yeah, I'm pretty partial to this remap mirror so far. I'm actually a big fan of using it. Just for the walls, we could try something different here. Let's just go back to M side. So this isn't fantastic, but it's pretty good. And let's go into the next step here. Here's a little filter trick that I discovered that I've been pretty keen on. Let's get some really cool vowel-y noises. So we're going to use a notch filter here. Bring the slope up to all the way 6. Then we're going to automate the cue. You can hear it gets a really cool vowel-y sort of sound. LFO, we're going to do the same thing. Make it unipolar. Go in, do something like this. Sync. Okay, cool. So here we're starting to get some pretty cool stuff. We're going to bring in another filter here. This one's just going to be your regular old low pass. And if we wanted to do something kind of like a 1-2 sort of movement, we could start bringing in some ramps. Put it on sync as well. Twice the length, and put it like. So that's sounding pretty sick. Let's just do some disperser spam. You can control drag to duplicate stuff real fast. That's too much. Cool, and that's pretty much it. There's a lot of potential here. Another drawback of Phase Plant, again, I keep talking about the downsides of the synth, but it's pretty fucking incredible. I'm just being honest with y'all as far as workflow goes. You can't click on any parameter and then automate it in the automation lanes. The only thing that will come up that'll come up in the automation lane automatically is the macros. So if you want to automate anything in Ableton's automation lanes, you're going to have to macro it, but it's not the end of the world. So this is a good one to modulate. Oh, I think I just macroed the wrong synth. Go me. Okay. So you can hear we can get some good sonic variation out of that. And then we could like macro this as well. And then we could also macro this one. And then just for the lulls, let's try switching around some different wavetables here. Maybe like a triangle. Maybe. I don't think this is going to sound good, but everything's worth a try. You never know until you try it. Again, I mean, I'm pretty keen on the morphs for the carrier here. And then, unfortunately, one of my favorite things about using operators is that you can really easily modulate or automate the ratios. But just for the laws, let's try that. It doesn't snap to the main one, so you'll be getting all these percents here, so you're going to get really atonal disharmonic stuff. So if you want to create a sound that has a lot of movement on these, which is definitely one of the coolest things to do, you're either going to want to resample a bunch of different stuff out with changing these, or make duplicates of the patch, or fine-tune your macro really well. That's not a great idea if we're being honest, but for the lols, let's just do some extra processing and see how that goes. Try the old comb filter. Oh my god. Oh. We can just do a tiny bit of movement. And then, like, we don't want it to be super overbearing. Kilohertz, if you're watching this, please add a dry wet knob to your formant filter. One little workaround, though, is we could do this. So that's fun. I'm liking this. Oh. Here's something pretty big brain that we can do. That's fun. So what we just did is bypass the third lane. That's going to go directly to the master. Now we all know that Serum has its direct sub out feature, which is cool if you're trying to put your sub bass in your patch and you don't want to do your sub bass separately, which sometimes can be good depending on how you like to write your music or whatever. Sometimes I've noticed that when your sub is coming from your mid bass patch, it just can give a feel or an energy to the track that you can't get if your sub bass is separate. But this is just going to be a little fun thing that you could do with the routing and phase plant that maybe if you're big brain, you've done it before, maybe this is obvious, maybe it's not, but I'll show you anyway. So if we go over here, we notice all our outputs actually have a routing here. So this goes to lane 1. It's going to hit our comb, then our dispersers, and then lane 1 goes to lane 2, which hits our formant filter that we're automating the mix on. So that's cool. And here's what we're going to do. The goal here is to just get a separate sub output that bypasses all of our effects. So I'm just going to real quick put in an EQ. Now we want slice EQ. Just cut off the lows. Get rid of all that sub, and the disperser kind of smears your sub around anyway, so nice and clean, no sub. Then we're going to go wavetable. We want to, we're going to minimize this. we're going to make a new group first. New group, and then in here we're going to make a wavetable. And by default, it doesn't make another output, so we're going to make an output, and then we're going to send it directly to lane 3. So now I have a nice clean sine wave that's bypassing all our effects and going right to lane 3. And then we're just going to put that on our main LFO here. So there we go. We have a cool built-in clean direct sub with our whole mid-range patch. And if we just wanted to do some quick and dirty processing for the lols, just, smack it with some OTTs pretty aggressively. That OTT is a little aggressive. Let's try taking some of the highs off. Oh, that's cool. You can see where that vowel bandpass is. And yeah, I'm not going to do any post-processing on this because this is mainly about the synthesis, but that's more or less it. That's what I like to call the phase plant super operator. I'll probably be doing some more phase plant tutorials in the future because it's a really cool synth. I hope you liked it, and try it out. Give me a shout if you discover anything cool. Hell yeah. See you later, guys.